Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Jeremy Beaman, our environment and energy reporter. Jeremy, the Biden administration finds itself beset on all sides as it concerns its environmental policy, not pleasing very many people right now.
No, it's not. This stretches back basically till when Biden came in office. He frustrated the oil and gas industry by putting a pause on new leasing on federal lands. That was later last year, in 2021, put on hold, and the administration slowly has rolled the leasing program back out. They held one lease sale last November, offshore lease sale, which ended up later on being thrown out by a judge.
Sure.
And now they just announced more onshore leasing that will be made available this summer at a sort of smaller range of lands and at a higher price.
Sure.
In terms of royalties. But so that has not necessarily been enough to sort of allay the concerns of the oil and gas industry, who point to other policies that have frustrated them.
Sure.
They say have restricted production. But at the same time, that same set of actions that might have at some level pleased the oil and gas industry has equally frustrated green lobbyists, environmentalist groups, many of whom insist that no new leasing should take place or would be able to take place if Biden is to meet his energy and climate goals. So he's frustrated both groups sort of at the same time. This, and then again, the solar industry too is frustrated with Biden, the Biden administration, not necessarily Biden himself, but with the Commerce Department for taking on this investigation into solar imports from Asia. And they really are emphasizing and have emphasized to us in particular how much this is crimping the industry, and because it's affecting, many companies are saying it's affecting the materials that they source from these countries, and companies that are based in these countries, these 4 Asian countries, are already canceling orders in some cases because they don't know what the price of these solar products are going to be, because the duties can be applied retroactively. And so the criticism's coming from all sides, from the oil and gas industry, from green groups, and from the solar industry too.
And so that's kind of politically a problem for the president, right? So you were in an election year. Democrats are trying to retain control of both houses of Congress. They're going to need some of these environmental activists to be enthusiastic, some of the suburban voters who vote on climate change and environmental issues. But they also are struck with this sort of high energy price climate, and it's very difficult to win elections if you're not doing anything to lower prices at the pump.
That's right. And they're trying it's a tired metaphor, but they're trying this balancing act really. So when they introduced the lease sales recently, they emphasized that they were, one, doing it because a court told them they had to.
Right.
And it was really in the first sentence of the Bureau of Land Management's announcement.
Right.
And so they're emphasizing that they'd rather not do this.
Right.
But they also are emphasizing that they cut down and limited the sort of amount of acreage that's going to be made available.
Sure.
And they hiked the royalty rate up. So it's sort of a second best option really for them. Ideally, the administration would not do any more of this, but as they say, the court, the Louisiana federal court has required them to carry on with the program. And so they're sort of trying to balance things. And on tariffs, again, on solar tariffs, when there's another sort of tariff regime, Section 201 tariffs they're called, the Biden administration had the option of renewing tariffs that Trump put in place, and they decided to renew them, but they also, at the same time, made an exemption for one type of solar panel, which was sort of a way that they could address interests of solar project developers who, by doing the exemption, and then of course by extending the tariffs which manufacturers favor. So they're being forced to this position to kind of weigh pros and cons of things and try to stand in some ways in the middle of some of these issues and support oil and gas production and things like that during the time of high prices, as you mentioned.
So in addition to all the things going on domestically and elsewhere with energy prices, you have the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine and some of the energy aspects of that, where that's been a key part of some of the sanctions to try to isolate Russia, have affected energy prices, but Russia is kind of striking back.
Yeah, they are striking back and we're doing things they've not done yet before during this war. Just a step back, it's hard to overestimate how much the war is kind of guiding the Biden administration's actions, especially on fossil fuels and what they want to see as far as production goes. Because as many have pointed out in the administration, earlier to sort of insulate themselves from supporting domestic production, as many of them have pointed out, it is a global market, oil and gas. Oil in particular. And so the more oil that everyone sort of brings to market brings down the price across the globe.
Right.
And so that's why they're sort of supporting that now. But just recently, the gas giant in Russia, Gazprom, said that they weren't going to send any more pipeline gas to Bulgaria, to Poland, which is the first time that they've made such an action since the war started.
Right.
Now, it can't really say that it caught anyone off guard, because this threat has been around for months. Even before the invasion in February, the EU was planning for this, and the Biden administration was planning with them in concert. And so, but it still is an escalation, by all means, and many people have used that word, and it sort of just reinforces everything that everyone's already said so far, all the power players, all the leaders in Europe, and the Biden administration too, which is what we need is to move Europe off of these supplies and do that by building more renewable energy, and in the meantime by getting them more gas from friendly countries, especially the U.S.
Because the United States has obviously banned import of Russian oil, but many of our European allies are far more dependent on Russia as an energy source than we are.
Right, and there are a few countries in Europe that produce a lot of oil and gas. Norway and the UK are two of them. Neither of them are members of the EU, but they sell into the EU. But the United States stands out because we have these vast resources here and we exploit them. And as green as we are in some ways, Europe has put the European market for energy is much more strict and not conducive to oil and gas production, and so they bring in what they need, and then they try to just emphasize renewables there, especially. But it's hard again. The sort of escalation that we've seen with this shutoff just has leaders running around saying this is what we expected to happen, and this sort of vindicates all the things that we've been saying and doing on moving away from Russian gas.
While Europe is undergoing a sort of energy crisis of its own as well.
Which makes it all the more difficult because there's some countries and some players, especially those disinterested players, people across the world who say Europe needs to do this. Europe needs to cut off gas today to end this war. And of course the Europeans say, well, yeah, you can say that because you're halfway around the world and you're not relying on these products, but we would literally have to shut down our economy if a source of energy that constitutes half of our entire energy supply were just to turn off to zero in a day. So certainly the EU is trying to do this and to phase things out, but they want to do it on their own terms. And Putin and what Gazprom has done is sort of emboldening them in some ways to really determine that this relationship is never going to go back to where it was. Someone told me this recently. Putin is always going to be a pariah now, and so is the energy coming from that country. So that's kind of where things stand.
Which could play into the favor of the Greens longer term.
Yeah. It could, and theoretically it will. It's just it's kind of a timing thing. It's not like Europe is not on the side of the Greens. Even the conservatives in Europe are green, as we would say as Americans. But it's just a question of what they can afford to do, and determine that they can afford to do economically at this time. But certainly, again, it reinforces for the Europeans, beyond the climate change question, the fact that we need to get away from these fuels, and especially the Russian source of these fuels.
Everybody trying to get away from Putin. Thank you, Jeremy. You can read Jeremy and subscribe to Daily on Energy at washingtonexaminer.com.